Welcome to the Civic Leader podcast. I'm Sylvie Légère. I'm the co-founder of the Policy Circle. And today we will be reading and discussing a Policy Circle brief about election integrity. And to do that, I invited Laura Jacksack, who has actually helped us put together this brief, right, Laura? And then also has participated in some of the Policy Circle conversations on this brief. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. The goal of this recording is really to provide Policy Circle members with an audio version of the Policy Circle brief. Of course, we invite everyone to revisit the actual brief because there's lots of links to information that you would find useful, and we'll mention that throughout this recording. Obviously, this is a great way for you to get the information and prepare for your discussion. So I'll do a brief introduction of Laura, and then we'll start reading the brief. And between each section, we'll have a short conversation. We are in a unique situation where we're recording this on Zoom today. So, Laura Jacksack is a graduate of Northwestern University and the University of Illinois College of Law. So, Laura Jacksack focuses her practice on election law and small business law, representing both nonprofit and for-profit entities. Laura, you counsel clients on federal and Illinois campaign finance law, candidate filings, challenges, litigation, election day issues, and post-election ballot counting and recounts. You also further provide advice regarding ballot integrity issues and ethics and campaign finance regulations. Laura advises corporations and nonprofit entities on a similar range of topics, including business formation, corporate governance, and client counseling matters. You're a member of the Chicago Bar Association, the Election Law Committee. You've been the Election Law Committee chair, and also the Illinois State Bar Association and the National Association of Parliamentarians. So welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise here. What are we hoping to learn here, and what we want to explore in reading this brief? We are recording this in a unique time where many states have a stay home ordinance and shelter-in-place order where we can't leave, which is why we're recording this via Zoom. We are in an election year, and some primaries have been postponed. Some states have been doing mail-in voting, and election integrity. This 2020 election will be crucial, right? Maybe you have some thoughts here, Laura?
Yeah. So I think that we don't know what November will look like. I expect it might look different in different states around the country. So I think the best thing that we can do is to be prepared. Be prepared for as many different possibilities as possible. So I think first we want to be prepared as if the election is going to go forward as it has in the past, which in many states will be some in-person voting. Now there are a few states that only have mail-in voting. But most states have some in-person voting. Increasingly, states also have the option to vote early, to vote ahead of Election Day. And in many states, ahead of the primary, an increasing number of people did that so that they could vote when it wasn't crowded, when there weren't lines, when they weren't around other people. But all of that early voting sort of just makes us have, instead of one Election Day, many election days,
right? And especially if we practice this social distancing, would really slow down the voting, actually. So, let's start. Let's start, and then we'll bring this issue up. We'll start with the brief, the election integrity brief, which can be found in the Policy Circle library. And I'll just read the introduction. Elections are the lifeblood of democracy and a free society. But elections must be free and fair in order for the results to be respected and to rely on them to determine who governs our local communities, states, and our country. And we are an example, I think, for the world also when it comes to our ability to have fair and and true elections. So how can you play a role in ensuring the integrity of the electoral process on election day? This is an overview. Read on for an overview of elections, the type of frauds that threatens the integrity of the election, and the role that you can have in ensuring fair and reliable election results. So the way this brief is structured is we'll talk about election day, kind of an overview of how that's run, then how elections are organized and run. We'll break down election fraud, what it is, and what can you do? What does it entail to be an election judge and a poll watcher? And then poll watching at nursing homes, closing a precinct could be a great way to have a big impact in the least amount of time. And then we'll discuss a little bit more, take action and point you. The brief has a lot of resources that you could go to learn more about this. Also, I just want to say for Policy Circle members, each brief come with a discussion guide for you to facilitate a discussion on this really important topic. And we invite everyone to take the time to discuss this topic on their next Policy Circle meetings. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you to kind of go over Election Day and give us an overview.
Our republic flourishes when citizens are confident that their vote is free, fair, and secure. Yet, according to a recent survey, 81% of Americans believe that election fraud is a very real problem. This growing concern jeopardizes our entire system of government, eroding our trust in elected leaders and undermining our confidence in the system by which they govern, beginning at the polls and rising up through the highest offices in the land. That was said by Catherine Engelbrecht, founder of True the Vote. Now, there are many components to free, fair, and secure elections, and many laws and rules govern the people and resources involved in campaigns and voting. In addition to voting, the most effective way you can participate in elections is by serving as a poll worker, specifically as an election judge or a poll watcher. Serving in one of these roles can help ensure that election rules are followed, thus ensuring the integrity of the results. This brief will focus on Election Day and your role in ensuring free, fair, and secure elections.
So how elections are organized and run. So the Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution provides the original guidance on elections, being within the purview of the states. While there have been many amendments and legislation since that, the general rule is that the states oversee elections, which is why it's so different in every state. So on an election day, voting takes place throughout the country in voting districts, which are comprised of precincts based on geographic area. Precincts are divisions of a larger geographic area, such as township or municipality. In some areas, just one precinct votes at a single location, and in other areas, many precincts vote together at a so-called voting center. And voters in each precinct report to a specific location for voting, where they may vote for federal, state, municipal candidates or initiative, such as a referenda. And primaries take place anywhere from the late winter through the summer, depending upon the schedule set by the state laws. And general elections are held the first Tuesday of November in even-numbered years. So I was really happy to read about what precincts are, because I hear about precincts, captains, precincts, and I really did not fully know what precincts were versus the counties, districts. So I felt that was kind of good to understand that. In large cities, you might have a precinct on a few blocks. In rural areas, this might include an area of a few miles. In suburban settings, a precinct might be several block squares. Voting districts are created by the state legislature in power at the time of the census. Some states require bipartisan or nonpartisan commissions to oversee the redistricting, while many do not. We are also in a census year, which is why it's so important to fill to complete the census. Laura, can you talk just a little bit about this, the redistricting and how it happens? I think that it would be interesting to just discuss this a little bit.
So this varies greatly from state to state. I believe that at least one Midwestern state actually uses a computer program, which sounds like a pretty fair way the computer program takes all census data into account, and it draws districts that are the most compact, contiguous, and equal numbers of people, of course, per district. And so in that state, you'll see that the districts tend to be much more as close to being a square sort of as possible. They take into effect, I think, some things like rivers and all. In some other states, there are bipartisan or nonpartisan commissions, and of course, they have their own factors to take into consideration. But many will take into consideration things like municipal boundary lines, things like that. Then we have some states that are the Wild West. Illinois, of course, is one of those, but there are many others, and there's been a lot of litigation actually in recent years about these. So you've probably possibly seen that in the news, and this may spark change going forward. But in these states, the partisan legislatures draw these districts, and so people sometimes say it's the legislators choosing their district rather than voters choosing their legislators.
Right.
Because people sort of want to, it's innate human, just human tendency. We want to draw things favorable for ourselves.
Right. It's just human nature. So how would one find out in their state how redistricting is done? If you just do a search on your state and redistricting,
you just
be
Google,
kind of you'll
state.
find out how the commissions are run. And there's different groups also, I think, that are focused on participating in that process. And this is not a topic of this brief, but this is a way of really participating in the election process. So, okay, so let me continue here. The elections in most states are administered by citizens called election judges, who are paid a modest stipend for their service on election day. They generally are not paid by government staff. The conduct of elections is structured to be run by the two major political parties, Republican and Democrat, with the goal being that they act as check on one another. So ballots at each voting location are tailored so that individuals are voting only in elections relevant to them. Some areas use paper ballots, which are then fed into voting machine. Other areas vote electronically on touchscreen machines that resemble ATM. Increasingly, counties are moving toward allowing voters to cast a ballot at any voting location within the county, rather than only at the voter's local polling location. These changes are made to accommodate our increasingly mobile society, where voters might spend their daytime hours at work in one part of a county, but live quite a distance away and not return home in time to vote at their home precinct. So technological advances have allowed this to happen, as poll books, lists of registered voters, are now usually electronic rather than paper, and ballots are increasingly electronic rather than paper as well. Having electronic ballots allows any ballot style within a jurisdiction to be programmed from any location. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, the voting, because with mailing, this does not mention the mail-in voting and how that is administered. So, and also the advances in technology. So I don't know if you have some thoughts there, Laura, to share on this topic.
Sure. So vote by mail ballots, which are called a few different things. Some states call them absentee. They're called by a few different names, but all of them involve a ballot being mailed to you. This could be at your home if that's where you request it to be sent. It could be, if you are a snowbird living in Florida for your primary, it could be sent to your address in Florida. It could be sent overseas. And you then voting that in the privacy of your home and taking all steps required to properly seal and secure your ballot. They're different in different states. Many of them require you to sign a certification that you alone voted this ballot, and that your signature is you are the same person as the person who registered to vote under this name, and then mailing that in. That ballot would then go directly to an election authority, to a county clerk, possibly to the Secretary of State's office in your state. It depends how your state is run. So that would sort of bypass this individual voter polling location. Now, it used to be the case in many places that these absentee or mail-in ballots would go to the voter's own polling location. And that would be more work for the election judges on election day. They'd have these couple extra mail-in ballots. That is not a typical practice anymore, though. And then just one more note on both the electronic and on the vote centers. A lot of people, I think, have sort of some concerns. I've heard of many things about, well, voting electronically, how can you really be sure that the coding hasn't changed or my vote hasn't changed? And I'll say that many electronic ballots simply have, and we have this, of course, here in Illinois, but this is quite common, that when you vote on this electronic cartridge, a paper will show right there on your machine that indicates who you're voting for. So you can confirm the electronic ballot is voting accurately, and that paper is saved. So if there were any problem or discrepancy after, that paper would be in the possession of the election authority, would be, available to courts or anyone else.
Yeah. So that's good. All right. So we're talking about election judges. A precinct is allotted a minimum of 3 election judge slots from one major political party and 2 from the other major party. Precincts alternate which party is present in the majority. For example, like odd-numbered precincts have a majority of Democrat election judges, and even-numbered precincts have a majority of Republican election judges, and vice versa. Larger precincts may be allotted more. It is crucial to have judges from both parties represented in a precinct to ensure integrity. When a precinct lacks a single bona fide election judge of one of the political parties, the statutorily created system to provide check and balances to ensure fair election in that precinct is lost. So that was interesting. I thought to realize how each party were represented and it alternated in precinct. So so is that always set in advance, the odd number, even number, or is there another formula sometimes in some states that's applied?
There are other formulas. Sometimes it depends how many people voted Republican or Democrat in a prior election to determine the numbers of election judges from each party, but always there would be election judges from both parties, and always it would be set in advance so that the parties would know how many slots they have and are permitted to fill in each precinct for a specific election.
Great. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Laura, to continue on.
Okay, so 2 important roles at the polls. Election judges are responsible for the administration of election procedures at a particular polling place on election day. They are individuals representing each of the major political parties, and they hold ultimate authority in the polling place. The workload of election judges has increased substantially over the last several years, as many states have changed their laws to allow people to register to vote in precinct on election day, yet they have not increased the number of election judges. Recent additions to election technology have also increased the complexity of this job, and they have led to many longtime elderly election judges becoming no longer willing or able to serve. But anytime there is a shortage of election judges, the system has the potential to break down, making it more important than ever to get new election judges into the mix. The other election role at the poll is poll watchers. Poll watchers monitor election procedures to ensure compliance with the law. The ultimate goal is holding fair elections that report accurate election results. Poll watchers differ from election judges in that they have no legal authority in the polling location and are strictly prohibited from touching any ballots or other voting equipment. Rather, they are election observers who report any irregularities at the polling place, thus helping to ensure free and fair conduct of elections. Many times, their mere presence is enough to deter fraud. reaching a legitimate, fair outcome requires following the law for every vote cast. Elections are often determined by a small number of votes. Some elections are won with margins of less than 30 votes, as in the 2011 Chicago nonpartisan 45th Ward aldermanic contest between John Garrido, who garnered 6,024 votes, and John Arena, the winner, who garnered 6,053 votes. For larger races, you may see bigger vote margins, but again, just a few votes plus or minus per precinct could swing the election the other way. In 2014, Mike Frericks beat Tom Cross for Illinois Treasurer by a little over 9,000 votes out of over 3.5 million votes cast. With 9,984 Illinois precincts in 2014, that's less than one vote per precinct. Recently in Virginia, a single vote was thought to have resulted in candidate Shelley Simmons' election, but the election was later determined to be a tie after a poll watcher reported that a discounted ballot should be counted, and a panel of judges agreed. Every vote counts. Unfortunately, in many races, voter fraud, or sometimes simply mistakes, takes place, and with the small margins, it is easy to see how a small number of these activities can influence the outcome of an entire election.
Yeah, so well, I know we'll go into more detail on how you sign up, but it's interesting to actually put names to the people who are working the precinct, the polling station, have the people that are on the table asking you your name, and then the people that are just walking around. I guess they're just ensuring that the election is proceeding in a fair and every vote is counted. So how many? It doesn't say here how many poll watchers there are. So does that depend on just the state law in general?
It does depend on the state law, but it's pretty typical that each candidate is allowed to have a poll watcher, sometimes two poll watchers, and each political party is also entitled to have a poll watcher, sometimes more than one, and some other groups as well. Perhaps some states would allow the League of Women Voters. There are some states, I've been in Wisconsin, where you didn't have to be a specific poll watcher for a candidate. You could be a citizen and just come in and show ID and sign in and be a poll watcher. And one other quick point is that while some states have provisions, if the polling places get too crowded, how do they decide who can't stay? But almost always, there are zero poll watchers. And so the problem is rarely having too many poll watchers. The problem is a lack.